The sterile hum of Argus Station Theta's administrative chamber reminded Captain Mara Keats of a hospital morgue, the kind where bureaucracy went to die and be reanimated as even more tedious paperwork. Her lean frame stood at rigid attention before the Federation Council's elevated platform, the charcoal gray uniform pressing against her throat like a noose of propriety. It had been 3 hours since her hearing began, and Counselor Draxel was still speaking. And furthermore, Captain Keats, your insubordination regarding the Erebus 9 survey reports constitutes a flagrant disregard for proper classification protocols. Counselor Draxel's jowls quivered with righteous indignation. The Terran Federation cannot function when engineers take it upon themselves to rewrite astronomical assessments on a whim. Mara's mechanical left arm whirred softly as she flexed her prosthetic fingers. The servos needed recalibration after the long journey to Argus Station Theta, but requesting maintenance before her hearing would have been seen as another strike against her. Too demanding, that one. With respect, Counselor, Mara replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. My report wasn't filed on a whim. The energy signatures I detected on Erebus 9 show harmonic fluctuations, inconsistent with any known abiotic geology. The spectrographic analysis clearly indicates— Enough! Draxel slammed his palm against the council table. We have reviewed your so-called evidence. The Federation's official assessment stands. Erebus 9 is a barren rock, orbiting an unstable red dwarf, mineral-poor, uninhabitable, and of no strategic value. Your request to allocate additional scanning resources is denied. Mara's green eyes flickered with barely suppressed frustration. This wasn't just about resource allocation. Something on that planet was responding to the survey probes, and the Federation was deliberately choosing to ignore it. From her peripheral vision, she caught sight of Lieutenant Rhea Orst, the only friendly face in the chamber, younger than Mara by several years. Orst still believed in the Federation's mission with the earnestness of a recent Academy graduate. Her expression now conveyed silent sympathy. The purpose of the Engineering Corps, Mara said, ignoring the warning glance from Orst, is to accurately document our findings, not sanitize them to fit predetermined classifications. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Draxel's face reddened. The purpose of the Engineering Corps is to follow directives. Your technical expertise is valued, Captain, but your tendency to question authority is not. The Federation cannot function without clear chains of command. And it cannot survive by burying inconvenient truths, Mara countered. The silence that followed felt electric. Draxel exchanged glances with the other counselors, unspoken messages passing between them. Captain Keats, Draxel finally said, his voice lowered to a dangerous register. Given your persistent concerns about Erebus 9, the Council has decided to reassign you. You will personally oversee the decommissioning of survey equipment on the planet's surface. Once complete, you will incinerate all data logs and prepare for extraction. Mara's heart sank. Extraction? With what crew? Draxel's smile didn't reach his eyes. No crew. You'll be provided a single-occupant pod with minimal life support. You're an engineer. I'm sure you'll manage the task efficiently. The truth dawned on her with cold clarity. This wasn't a reassignment. It was a death sentence. This is in direct violation of Federation safety protocols, she said, her voice steady despite the shock. Erebus 9 experiences regular acidic dust storms and radiation flares. Standard procedure requires a minimum 3-person team for any planetary surface operation. Your concern for protocol is noted, Draxel replied. However, given your unique insights into this special planet, the Council believes you alone are qualified for this mission. His emphasis on special dripped with sarcasm. Your pod departs in 3 hours. Dismissed. As the chamber emptied, Lieutenant Orst hurried to Mara's side. This is insane, she whispered. They can't just— They can and they are. Mara cut her off, already calculating survival odds. Don't get involved, Rhea. This is what happens when you tell the Federation something they don't want to hear. I could file an appeal, delay the launch, and end up in the pod with me? Mara shook her head. One of us making this suicide run is enough? In her quarters, Mara packed with grim efficiency, her power conversion toolkit, a weathered plasma pistol with 4 rounds, and a handful of technical manuals that might prove useful. Her fingers traced the photograph embedded in her prosthetic arm, her younger sister, laughing on a beach they'd visited before the border skirmish that had cost Mara her limb. Not how I planned to go. Ellie, she murmured to the image. But I'll be damned if I don't cause some trouble on my way out. 3 hours later, Mara stood in the airlock as her single-occupant pod prepared for detachment. Through the viewport, she could see Counselor Draxel and several other officials watching, faces deliberately blank, the indifference of those sending someone to die. Lieutenant Orst was there too, pale-faced and conflicted. She raised her hand in a salute that seemed more apology than farewell. As the airlock sealed and the pod detached from Argus Station Theta, Mara watched the station grow smaller through the viewport. Bastards, she whispered to no one. Then, with the pragmatism that had defined her career, well, let's see what this dead planet has to say for itself. The descent to Erebus 9 was every bit as violent as Mara had anticipated. Her pod shrieked through the thin atmosphere, heat shields glowing orange against the blackness of space. The planet's surface, a wasteland of reddish-brown dust and jagged obsidian formations, rushed up to meet her with alarming speed. Impact alarms blared as the pod hit the surface, skidding across dunes of fine particulate before slamming into a rocky outcropping. The force threw Mara against her restraints, knocking the breath from her lungs. When the world stopped spinning, she ran a quick self-assessment. No broken bones. Her prosthetic arm had sustained minor damage to the outer plating, but the internal mechanics still functioned. The pod, however, hadn't fared as well. Wonderful, she muttered, examining the control panel's blinking red warnings. The primary power conductor was fried, life support running on emergency reserves. She had perhaps 2 days before the air recyclers failed completely. Through the viewport, Erebus 9 presented a desolate panorama. The horizon stretched in all directions, smeared with the red dwarf's flaring light. Jagged formations of black rock punctuated endless dunes of grayish-brown dust. No life. Total desolation. Just as the Federation reports had claimed. Mara sealed her environment suit and popped the hatch. The exit ramp descended with a hiss of hydraulics, releasing a plume of dust. Her boots hit the surface with a muffled thud. Even through her suit, she could feel the planet's hostility, the acidic bite of the air, the radiation that made her radiation meter tick upward. I was supposed to be dead, she said to the empty landscape. Instead, I'm cleaning up a planetary dumpster. Survival came first. Mara returned to the pod and began the process of rerouting power from an old nuclear microcell to the failing life support systems. It was intricate work, the kind that required all her engineering expertise and improvisation with limited tools. By the time she'd stabilized the pod's power grid, the red dwarf was setting, casting long shadows across the dusty terrain. Next, she deployed the refuge dome, an inflatable, foil-lined structure designed for temporary shelter during planetary surveys. The dome's compressor coughed and sputtered as it fought against the corrosive atmosphere, but eventually expanded into a silvery half-sphere adjacent to the pod. Mara surveyed her handiwork with grim satisfaction. She might have been sent here to die, but she wouldn't make it easy for the Federation. She'd live as long as possible, if only despite Counselor Draxel's smugness. The next morning, if the cycle of light and dark on this miserable rock could be called a day, Mara began work on a solar collector. The red dwarf provided feeble energy compared to most stars, but it was better than nothing. She'd just finished calibrating the collection panel when she felt it, a low vibration through the soles of her boots, like distant music reverberating through rock. She froze, sensors immediately alert. The sensation lasted only a moment before fading. Probably just seismic activity, she reasoned. Tectonic shifts weren't uncommon on planets in this system. That night, however, as she huddled in her refuge dome reviewing technical schematics, the vibration returned. This time, the entire foundation of the tent trembled. Not violently, but with a rhythmic pattern. Mara checked her instruments. The seismograph was registering regular harmonic spikes at 427 Hz, too regular to be natural geological activity. Armed with her plasma pistol and a portable scanner, she ventured outside. The twin moons of Erebus 9 cast enough light to navigate without her helmet lamp, giving the landscape an eerie, blue-tinted glow. The vibration led her to a formation of boulders approximately 50 meters from her camp. As she approached, something impossible happened. One of the larger boulders, a crystalline formation she'd dismissed as ordinary rock, shifted. Not a dramatic movement, but a subtle realignment of its facets. The crystalline surface caught the moonlight, refracting it into polar arcs that danced across the dusty ground. Mara's scientific mind raced through explanations. Thermal expansion, optical illusion, her own oxygen-deprived brain playing tricks, but none fit what she was witnessing. The boulder was moving deliberately, its prismatic surface changing configuration in response to her presence. Heart pounding. She activated her portable lighter ping. The pulse swept over the boulder, and to her astonishment, something responded, a sound above human hearing range, but registered by her equipment as a pure, bell-like tone. Then another. Then a series, forming what could only be described as a melody. Mara stood transfixed. This wasn't random noise. This was communication. With trembling hands, she adjusted her scanner to record a 30-second harmonic sequence based on the boulder's emissions. Then, she played it back, directing the sound toward the crystal. The response was immediate. The boulder's facets shifted again, emitting its own modified waveform, a response that incorporated elements of her sequence, but added new tonal variations. "Holy shit," Mara breathed. Her scanner was registering energy signatures, identical to those she'd detected from orbit. The very readings the Federation had dismissed as instrument error. She stepped closer, scientific caution momentarily overcome by wonder. "Can you understand me?" she asked, feeling slightly ridiculous talking to a rock. The crystal pulsed, facets rearranging into new configurations. No clear response, but definitely a reaction to her voice. Mara retreated to her dome, mind racing with implications. Erebus 9 wasn't dead. Something lived here, something unlike any life form the Federation had encountered before. And they'd sentenced her to die on this planet because she'd tried to tell them the truth. Back at Argus Station Theta, Lieutenant Rhea Orst sat at her monitoring station, troubled by what she was seeing. The automated telemetry from Mara's pod was transmitting unusual data. According to the readings, Mara wasn't just surviving. She was actively engaging with the planet's surface. "Any updates on Captain Keats?" Counselor Draxel's voice made Orst jump. He stood behind her, peering at her screen with thinly veiled suspicion. "Standard deployment procedures, sir," Orst replied, keeping her voice neutral. "She's established a temporary base and begun decommissioning survey equipment as ordered." Draxel frowned. "And these energy signatures?" Orst swallowed. The readings clearly showed harmonic patterns, similar to those in Mara's original report. The very findings that had earned her exile. "Likely interference from the red dwarf's solar flares. Sir, I'll apply a filter to clean up the data." "See that you do," Draxel said. "The Erebus 9 matter is closed. I don't want to see any more of Captain Keats's creative interpretations circulating." After Draxel left, Ors decrypted a partial transmission that had been embedded in the telemetry data. It contained just 5 words. "I hear something. Boulders moved." Orst stared at the message, torn between loyalty to the Federation and the growing certainty that Mara had been right all along. She began composing a response, then hesitated. Any communication beyond standard protocols would be flagged. Sending help would mean defying direct orders, career suicide at best, a one-way pot at worst. Meanwhile, on Erebus 9, Mara had spent 3 days attempting to communicate with the crystalline formation. Progress was frustratingly slow. The crystal responded to sound and light, but in patterns she couldn't decipher. She needed a more sophisticated interface. Returning to her pod, Mara inventoried what remained of the survey equipment. Most was standard Federation tech: scanners, sample collectors, data storage units. But among them, she found items she could repurpose: spare microchips, antenna coils, and fractal-etched power crystals. Using her prosthetic arm's built-in microforge, a modification she'd made years ago, technically against regulations, Mara began assembling a crude device she mentally dubbed a photon resonance translator, or PRT. The work was delicate, requiring her to salvage components from her pod's non-essential systems. "If I'm going to die here," she recorded in a short voice log, "I'll make sure it's on my own terms." After 48 hours of trial and error, Mara had a working prototype. The PRT could convert sound waves into light patterns and vice versa, essentially creating a rudimentary translation matrix. She returned to the boulder formation, PRT in hand. Other crystals had appeared, or perhaps they had always been there, camouflaged against the landscape until they chose to reveal themselves. They formed a rough circle, facets occasionally shifting to catch the sunlight. Mara activated the PRT and transmitted a simple binary tone, the equivalent of "hello," in the most basic form she could devise. The crystals responded with a 7-note harmonic that her device translated as unknown lexical pattern, but definitely a response. Over the next 2 days, Mara refined the PRT's algorithms, isolating repeating syntax patterns in the crystal's communications. 3 rising overtones seemed to function as a greeting. 2 falling undertones appeared to be questions. On the 5th day, a breakthrough came. A prominent spire-like crystal formation at the center of what Mara now thought of as a gathering emitted a complex harmonic sequence. The PRT translated it, haltingly, into "we, wake, why." Mara's heart raced. She carefully composed a response, explaining in simplified terms the concepts of Federation, engineers, and survival. The crystal spire, which she mentally named Oryx for its golden-hued facets, responded after a long pause. Flares stop, nights flicker, share purpose. The statement was cryptic, but Mara understood the essential meaning. The crystals had been dormant during the planet's long nights, awakening only when solar flares triggered some form of activation. And now, they wanted to know why she was here. In the days that followed, Mara established a rudimentary dialogue with Oryx and the other crystals, which she learned called themselves the Luminari. She shared basic mathematics, engineering concepts, and even attempted humor, playing a snippet of Earth comedy through the PRT. Why did the robot cross the road? To her amazement, the crystals emitted a staccato shimmer that the PRT interpreted as laughter. In return, Oryx taught Mara about resonance nodes, clusters of crystalline veins beneath the planet's surface that functioned as natural microfusion power sources. With careful instruction, Mara learned to tap these nodes, channeling energy to her failing equipment. The breakthrough transformed her survival prospects. She retrofitted her dome to draw power from a nearby node, replacing the flickering emergency lights with a steady violet glow. She rigged sonic emitters from PRT components to ward off the acidic dust storms that periodically swept across the landscape. For the first time since her arrival, Mara felt something beyond anger and determination, a flutter of hope. She wasn't just surviving. She was building something. The Luminari, too, seemed to be evolving through their interactions, developing new facets and harmonic capabilities. One evening, as Mara sat outside her dome, sipping coffee made from ersatz beans and water recycled through crystalline condensers Oryx had helped design, she realized something profound. She wasn't alone anymore. This place, this supposedly dead planet, had become something more than a prison. It had become a partnership. That same evening, on Argus Station Theta, Lieutenant Orst finally succeeded in decoding Mara's encrypted transmissions. What she found alarmed her enough to risk bringing it to Counselor Draxel's attention. "Sir," she said, standing rigidly before his desk, "I believe there's a situation developing on Erebus 9 that requires immediate attention." Draxel barely glanced up from his console. "Lieutenant, unless Captain Keats has miraculously completed her mission ahead of schedule, I have no interest in hearing about it." "Sir, she's activating power arrays across the planet's surface. The energy signatures are consistent with fusion technology, but with harmonic variances I've never seen before. Erebus 9 is changing." That got his attention. Changing how? Orst displayed a holographic comparison of the planet's surface readings, before Mara's arrival, and now. The difference was startling. Where before there had been inert landscape, now there were pulsing nodes of energy interconnected by flowing lines of power. "Impossible," Draxel muttered. "She has no resources for this kind of deployment." "With respect, sir, I don't believe Captain Keats is doing this alone." Orst hesitated, then added, "Her original report may have been correct. There could be something alive on that planet." Draxel's face darkened. "She's creating an unauthorized energy signature. This is a direct violation of her orders." He tapped his console. "Order immediate purge protocol. Deploy the FSV Vigilance and FSV Arbitration to Erebus 9. "Sir, shouldn't we attempt communication first? If Captain Keats has discovered a new life form?" "That's precisely why we're going. Lieutenant, if there is something on that rock, it falls under Federation jurisdiction, and Captain Keats has no authority to establish contact without proper protocols." His tone left no room for argument. "The task force departs in 6 hours. Orst nodded, saluted, and left, her stomach knotting with dread. She had just enough time to send one final encrypted message to Mara. A single word: "Prepare." On Erebus 9, Mara and the Luminari had made remarkable progress. What had begun as a crude camp was now a thriving outpost. The dome had expanded into a complex of interconnected structures, each pulsing with energy drawn from the crystalline veins below the surface. The Luminari themselves had evolved dramatically. Under Oryx's guidance, they had developed more sophisticated communication capabilities, moving beyond simple tones to complex harmonics that the PRT could translate with increasing accuracy. Mara had spent weeks teaching them about human culture, science, and history. In return, they shared their own understanding of the universe, a perspective based on vibration, resonance, and collective consciousness. When Orst's warning arrived, Mara was deep in conversation with Oryx about the nature of time. The crystal's facets dimmed momentarily as she processed the message. "Danger comes," Oryx transmitted through the PRT. "Federation ships approach." Mara nodded grimly. "I knew they wouldn't leave us alone forever. They've probably detected our power signatures." "What will they do?" The harmonic carried a note of concern. "Best case, they'll want to study you, classify you as Federation assets. Worst case," Mara's expression hardened, "they'll see you as a resource to be exploited, or a threat to be eliminated." "We are neither," Oryx responded. "We are Luminari. This is our home." "I know." Mara paced the dome, mind racing through options. "We need to prepare defenses." "Defense without harm," Oryx clarified. We do not kill. Mara looked at the crystal formation with newfound respect. Despite never having encountered hostile forces, the Luminari had immediately established an ethical boundary. Agreed. We'll find a way to protect ourselves without casualties. Over the next 3 days, Mara and the Luminari worked tirelessly. They converted harmonic resonance nodes into defensive arrays. They established a planetary communication network that allowed all Luminari clusters to coordinate responses. And they prepared for first contact with the Federation task force. The Federation ships arrived exactly as Orst's warning had predicted. 2 frigates, the FSV Vigilance and FSV Arbitration, entered Erebus 9's orbit, their scanning beams sweeping the surface. Mara stood outside her dome, watching the sky. Through the PRT, Oryx communicated. They see us. Yes, Mara confirmed. They'll try to communicate soon. As if on cue, the comm unit in her suit crackled to life. Captain Keats, this is Commander Serrano of the Federation Envoy Ship Arbitration. By order of the Terran Federation, identify yourself, surrender unauthorized technology, and await decommissioning protocol. Mara exchanged a glance with Oryx, whose facets shimmered with determination. She activated the PRT, amplifying her voice through crystalline-tuned frequencies that would reach the orbiting ships. This is Captain Mara Keats of the Terran Federation. These are now Luminari sovereign nodes. We refuse. The silence that followed was brief, but profound. Captain Keats, Commander Serrano's voice returned. You are in violation of multiple Federation protocols. We are authorized to use force if necessary. This is your final warning. Around Mara, the Luminari began to move. Crystalline formations throughout the area shifted, aligning into a shimmering ring that surrounded her base. Oryx grew taller, its spire reaching nearly 4 meters high, facets glowing with inner light. We are ready, Oryx transmitted. The Federation made the first move. The FSV Vigilance launched an energy salvo, a warning shot aimed at an uninhabited area near Mara's base. The beam streaked toward the surface, a blinding line of concentrated power. Before it could hit, the Luminary responded. The crystalline ring emitted a harmonic pulse that intercepted the beam, folding the energy through refractive prisms into harmless optical displays. The sky above Erebus 9 filled with geometric auroras, drifting into space like luminescent jellyfish. Commander Serrano's voice returned, tighter now. What technology are you employing, Captain? Surrender it immediately. Mara couldn't help but smile. It's not technology, Commander. It's life. The Luminari are intelligent beings, and this is their home. The ships adjusted position. The next attack was more determined. A volley of tactical missiles designed to disable rather than destroy. Again, the Luminari responded, their harmonic pulse disrupting the targeting transponders and causing the frigate's weapons to lock onto each other. Most missiles veered off harmlessly, but one, overloaded by the harmonic feedback, detonated near the FSV Arbitration's sensor array, blinding its forward-scanning dome. First blood, Mara murmured, though no lives had been lost. A new voice entered the communication channel, older, female, with the unmistakable tone of command. Captain Keats, this is Admiral Kira Mantis from Argus Station Theta. Stand down at once. We can negotiate reprieve if you cease these hostilities. Mara recognized the name, a hardliner known for her ruthless efficiency. Admiral Mantis, she replied, you exiled me to die. Now I defend this planet with those you called dead rocks. There will be no surrender. The Admiral's response was cold. Fireito beam cannons at grid coordinate 17C. Maximum dispersion. The ships adjusted position, and moments later, the sky lit up with concentrated energy beams, dozens of them, targeting Mara's base and the surrounding crystalline formations. Oryx and the Luminari responded immediately. The harmonic ring expanded, forming a prismatic lattice that extended upward into the atmosphere, a planetary resonance shield that refracted the incoming beams into harmless light cascades. More remarkably, several Federation bombers that had been deployed from the frigates suddenly veered off course. Later, their pilots would report experiencing what they could only describe as catastrophic cognitive feedback, a sensation of existential dread that made it impossible to maintain targeting lock. Not wanting to lose momentum, Mara coordinated with Oryx to launch a counterattack. Using the sonic wave cannons she'd constructed from modified PRT components, they targeted the frigate's hull plating with precise harmonic frequencies that caused structural vibrations. Not enough to cause catastrophic failure, but sufficient to disorient the crew and trigger evacuation protocols. The effect was immediate. Both Federation ships began retreat maneuvers, pulling back to a higher orbit to reassess. In that moment of respite, Oryx initiated a planet-wide broadcast. The crystalline formations across Erebus 9 aligned, creating a massive harmonic array that projected Oryx's message beyond the atmosphere, reaching not just the Federation ships, but nearby systems as well. Erebus 9 is now Lumina. We woke. We are sovereign. Remove your eyes, or be seen as the ones without comprehension. The broadcast continued, a complex harmonic signal that rippled outward through space. On nearby planets, Federation probes began registering unusual energy spikes, echoes of Lumina's declaration. Admiral Mantis's voice returned, strained and uncertain. "Captain Keats, what have you done?" "Nothing," Mara replied. "The Luminary did this. They're awake now, Admiral, and they're not alone." After a tense silence, Mantis ordered a tactical withdrawal. "We'll regroup. Stand down." The two frigates limped away, leaving behind damaged sensor buoys and confused crew members. Mara stood atop one of the crystalline spires, now glowing pale cyan in the aftermath of the conflict. Her prosthetic arms' photoreceptors reflected the prismatic sky as she watched the Federation ships fade into pinpoints of light. "We did it," she said to Oryx, who pulsed with quiet satisfaction beside her. "Without death," the crystal confirmed. "Protection without destruction." That evening, Mara composed a final encrypted transmission to Lieutenant Orst. "We have a flag now, and a kill count of 0 because we don't kill. But we defended ourselves. Federation, meet the new era." On Argus Station Theta, Federation automated logs updated with a new classification. Erebus 9 reclassified, hostile sovereign planet. Mara entered what the Luminari called the Great Chamber of Light, an amphitheater formed by towering crystalline monoliths that Oryx had designated as council nodes. The space hummed with gentle harmonic resonance as she stood before the assembled Luminari, who pulsed in approval. She removed her helmet, inhaling the cold, recycled air that the Luminari had helped purify, and said softly, "Sent to die, we chose to live." The 6 months following the confrontation with the Federation saw remarkable changes on Lumina. What had begun as Mara's desperate survival effort had blossomed into a thriving community, a unique partnership between human ingenuity and crystalline consciousness. Mara and the Luminari established a Council of Harmonies, where decisions were reached through multi-tone consensus rather than hierarchical command. The council chamber itself was a marvel of hybrid architecture, a dome whose walls incorporated living crystal formations that pulsed with light when speaking. Together, they raised the new planetary flag, a spiral of emerald violet light refracted through a crystalline lattice, symbolizing the unity between organic life and mineral consciousness. The flag flew atop the highest spire of what was now a sprawling complex of interconnected domes and crystal formations. News of Lumina spread throughout the Federation, despite official attempts to suppress the story. Underground news feeds picked up the tale. Exiled engineer turns dead planet into sovereign world. Evidence of a living planet countered decades of Federation classification errors, sparking debates in academic and political circles alike. On Argus Station Theta, Lieutenant Orst had been promoted to field investigator, a position that gave her access to classified Federation archives. She used this privilege to quietly undermine Counselor Draxel's authority, leaking official memos that documented his deliberate suppression of Mara's findings and his order to exile her. For Mara herself, life on Lumina brought unexpected fulfillment. The cynicism that had defined her career in the Federation began to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since her early days as an engineer. She spent her mornings teaching Luminary children crystal sprouts that emerged from the planet's surface in response to the awakening of the Elder formations. These younger crystals learned human art forms with surprising aptitude, creating paintings with luminescent dust and composing stories in tonal sequences that the PRT translated into haunting narratives. In the afternoons, Mara worked with Oryx and other Elder Luminary to develop new technologies that merged crystalline resonance with human engineering principles. They created sustainable power systems, atmospheric processors that gradually made portions of the planet's surface breathable, and communication arrays that could receive and translate signals from distant stars. Despite being labeled a criminal by Federation hardliners, Mara found herself more content than she had been in years. The bitterness that had fueled her confrontation with Counselor Draxel was gradually replaced by something she hadn't expected to find on this supposedly dead world: hope. The Federation, however, was far from accepting the new status quo. Admiral Mantis convened an emergency summit to address what was now being called the Lumina situation. Internal factions quickly emerged. The hardliners, led by Counselor Draxel, pushed for a full-scale invasion. "We cannot allow a Federation officer to establish a rogue state," he argued. "It sets a dangerous precedent." The moderates suggested diplomatic recognition, fearing what they called a potential awakening contagion. Intelligence reports indicated unusual energy signatures on other supposedly dead planets following Lumina's broadcast. A small but vocal faction of pacifists argued for leaving Lumina alone, citing legal precedent regarding planetary sovereignty and the ethical implications of confronting a newly discovered intelligent species. "We cannot appear weak," Draxel insisted during a particularly heated session. "The Federation's authority rests on consistent application of our laws." Admiral Mantis, still smarting from her defeat at Lumina, found herself in an unexpected position of caution. "The Luminari demonstrated capabilities we don't fully understand," she reminded the Council. "Any further military action must be preceded by thorough intelligence gathering." Meanwhile, on Lumina, Mara was becoming aware of ripples spreading beyond their planetary system. During a late-night resonance session with Oryx, the crystal conveyed troubling news. "Other worlds awaken." Oryx's harmonics translated through the now sophisticated PRT. "Our broadcast triggered dormant nodes throughout the sector. A resonance wavefront now spreads outward." "Are they like you?" Mara asked. "Crystalline intelligences?" "Similar but distinct," Oryx replied. "Some slept longer. Some harbor different memories. All now question their classification as dead." Mara realized that Lumina stood at the forefront of a potentially galaxy-wide upheaval, a challenge to Federation authority that went beyond their single planet. The implications were staggering. "The Federation won't accept this easily," she warned. "They'll see it as an existential threat to their control." Oryx's facets shimmered in what Mara had come to recognize as their equivalent of a shrug. "Classification errors are their mistake, not ours. We existed before their eyes saw us. We will exist after they look away." The philosophical perspective of the Luminari continued to surprise Mara. Despite their rapidly evolving understanding of human politics and technology, they maintained a fundamentally different view of time and existence, one that made the Federation's urgency seem almost childish by comparison. As the red dwarf set that evening, casting Lumina's crystalline spires into silhouette, Mara walked through what the Luminari called memory fields, gardens of refractive crystal formations that stored echoes of past moments. Here, snippets of conversation, laughter, tears, and the tense exchanges during the Federation confrontation were preserved as harmonic patterns that could be accessed by anyone who knew how to listen. Mara had begun contributing to these fields, teaching the luminary how to incorporate organic elements into their crystal matrices. She knelt now beside a newly planted section, carefully depositing a small vial of human-engineered memory seeds, hybrid organisms that would germinate into nodes, blending organic and crystalline life. "What will they become?" Oryx asked, manifesting beside her in a shimmer of golden light. "I don't know," Mara admitted. "That's the beauty of it. They'll evolve based on their environment and the memories we share with them. Something new, something neither human nor luminary, but both." The concept of deliberate evolution fascinated the luminary, who had previously experienced change only through gradual geological timeframes. The idea that life could intentionally transform itself was revolutionizing their society. As twin sunset painted Lumina's horizon with streaks of crimson and gold, Mara raised a mug of crystal-distilled coffee, a luxury she'd perfected over the past months, in a toast to the Luminary Council that had gathered to observe the planting. "We were told to die," she said, her voice carrying across the crystalline amphitheater. "But instead, we sang louder." The luminary responded with a harmonic chorus that made the very air vibrate with jubilation, a sound that carried beyond their gathering, beyond their settlement, and out toward the stars where distant planets blinked in harmonic response. From the highest point of the settlement, Lumina's flag rippled against the darkening sky, its spiral pattern catching the last rays of sunlight. Mara stood beneath it, gazing upward at the emerging stars, thinking of the Federation ships that would inevitably return, of the awakening worlds beyond their horizon, and of the uncertain future they faced. 6 months ago, they had said this place was dead. Now it hummed with life, and soon, the galaxy would reconsider what it thought it knew. On Argus Station Theta, Lieutenant Orst stood at her monitoring station, watching the increasing reports of anomalous energy signatures from previously classified dead planets. Each report brought a small smile to her face, a dangerous expression in the current political climate. Counselor Draxel approached, his face grave. "Lieutenant, the Council has approved a reconnaissance mission to Sector 7G. You'll be leading it." Orst maintained her neutral expression, despite her surprise. "Sector 7G? That's the Cadmius cluster. Nothing but dead planets there, according to our records." "Precisely," Draxel replied. "We need to verify that status, given recent anomalies." Orst understood the unspoken message. The Federation was scrambling to check every supposedly dead planet in their jurisdiction, fearing a domino effect triggered by Lumina's awakening. "When do I depart, sir?" "Immediately. And Lieutenant," Draxel lowered his voice, "if you encounter anything unusual, your orders are to observe and report only. No contact. Is that clear?" "Crystal, sir," Orst replied, suppressing a smile at her own choice of words. As Draxel walked away, Orst turned back to her console and discreetly checked the encrypted channel she maintained with Mara. No new messages, but the connection remained open, a silent promise of continued alliance across the stars. Back on Lumina, Mara sat in the council chamber with Oryx and the other elder Luminari, discussing the latest developments in their hybrid technology program. The meeting was interrupted by a younger crystal formation, one Mara had nicknamed Dre, for its slightly abrasive harmonic pattern that reminded her of an old Scottish engineer she'd once known. "Oi, company's coming," Dre's translated voice announced through the PRT. "Federation scout ship, high orbit, trying to be sneaky about it." Mara exchanged a look with Oryx. They were bound to return eventually. Reconnaissance only? "Aye, just looking," Dre confirmed. "No weapons hot. Shall we give them a wee light show? The suggestion sparked a ripple of harmonic laughter through the council chamber. The luminary had developed a playful streak when it came to Federation observers, often creating elaborate prismatic displays that scrambled scanning equipment while revealing nothing of strategic value. Let them look, Oryx decided, after consulting the harmonic consensus. But show them only the memories we choose to share. Mara nodded, understanding the strategy. The Federation would see a thriving, peaceful settlement, evidence that Lumina posed no threat, but also clear proof of its sovereignty. As the council dispersed, Mara remained with Oryx in the chamber. A question had been forming in her mind for weeks now, one she finally gave voice to. The other awakening planets, will they follow Lumina's example? Peaceful coexistence. Oryx's facets shifted thoughtfully. Unknown. Each world awakens differently. Some may remember ancient wounds. Others may seek isolation. The resonance connects us, but does not control us. The Federation fears a unified front, Mara said. A crystal alliance rising against them. Such fear reveals more about them than about us, Oryx observed. We seek harmony, not dominance. But harmony requires respect for difference. The philosophical depth of the luminary continued to impress Mara. Despite having existed for millennia, they approached their sudden introduction to galactic politics with a wisdom that put most human leaders to shame. That night, as the Federation scout ship continued its silent observation from orbit, Mara stood on the balcony of her quarters, gazing up at the star-filled sky. The photograph embedded in her prosthetic arm caught the starlight, her sister's face smiling back at her across time and space. "You wouldn't believe where I ended up, Ellie," she whispered to the image. "Sent to die on a dead planet, and instead—" She didn't finish the thought aloud. But as she returned inside, the memory of her words lingered in the crystalline walls. And instead, I found a home. In the weeks that followed, more Federation observers arrived, some openly, others attempting stealth that the luminary's sensitive detection systems easily pierced. None took hostile action, but the increasing frequency of their appearances suggested growing concern at the highest levels of Federation government. Lumina itself continued to evolve. The hybrid technologies Mara and the Luminary developed began transforming the planet's harsh environment. Atmospheric processors converted toxic gases into breathable air over expanding regions. Temperature regulators moderated the extreme swings between day and night. And most remarkably, the memory seeds Mara had planted began to sprout, creating the first generation of truly hybrid life forms that combined crystalline structure with organic growth patterns. Word of these developments spread through underground Federation channels, drawing the attention of scientists, philosophers, and even a few bold politicians who began to question the wisdom of treating Lumina as a rogue state rather than a valuable new ally. Admiral Mantis, whose initial humiliation had gradually transformed into reluctant respect, proposed a radical solution during a closed Federation Council session. "Perhaps it's time we considered diplomatic recognition. Captain Keats has demonstrated remarkable restraint. The Luminari have shown no aggressive intent beyond their own borders." Councillor Draxel was apoplectic. Recognition would validate insubordination. Every disgruntled engineer with a grievance would think they could establish their own fiefdom on some backwater planet. "With respect, Councillor," Mantis countered. "There's a difference between insubordination and being right. Captain Keats identified a sentient species that our protocols misclassified. Our response was not our finest hour." The debate raged for days. But a shift was occurring. A gradual recognition that the Federation's authority rested not on inflexible enforcement of outdated protocols, but on its ability to adapt to new realities. On Lumina, Mara received reports of these developments with cautious optimism. The Luminari, with their longer perspective on time, were neither surprised nor particularly concerned about Federation politics. They will come to understand or they will not. Oryx observed during a council session. Either way, Lumina remains Lumina. As the Red Dwarf set on another day, Mara walked through the settlement that had grown from her desperate survival camp into a thriving community. Crystal spires interfaced with human-designed habitation domes. Hybrid gardens flourished in carefully maintained atmospheric bubbles. And throughout it all, the harmonic song of the luminary echoed, a constant reminder that life existed here long before the Federation deemed this world worthy of notice. In her quarters, Mara composed what might be her final message to Lieutenant Orst. The Federation asks whether we pose a threat. Perhaps the better question is, does the truth threaten them? 6 months ago, I was sent to die on a dead planet. Today, that planet has a flag, a people, and a future. Our kill count remains 0, not because we cannot defend ourselves, but because we choose a different path. Tell them that, Rhea. Tell them we're waiting when they're ready to listen. She sent the message, knowing it might never reach Orst, or might be intercepted by Federation security. It didn't matter. The truth had a way of making itself known, just as life had a way of emerging in the most unexpected places. As she stepped outside again, Lumina's flag rippled against the night sky, its spiral pattern reflecting starlight. Distant planets blinked in harmonic response, an unspoken chorus of awakening worlds. 6 months ago, they had said this place was dead. Now it hummed with life. And soon, the galaxy must reconsider what it thought it knew.